next element of what is a recordation versus a registration. Remember something, and don't laugh at this. This is a fact. And for all you attorneys that want to look this stuff up later, you're going to go, oh, sure, until you actually dig in and you're going to go, oh, crap. So there are hundreds of Supreme Court rulings talking about state citizenship, both at the state level, federal level. And when you take a look at the dual offices in each department or branch, there is an office position to uphold, support, and protect and defend the Constitution. That's your oath of office, but that only applies to state citizens. I can show you a Supreme Court ruling right now where a United States citizen does not have access to the Bill of Rights. Okay, that's already done. Did they tell you that? No. They didn't want to play all these acts in the public, like you still are powerful and this and that, and that actually applies to you. No, it doesn't. Why? Because you have an employmentship with the United States located in the District of Columbia, and there's policies that are enforced by policy enforcement officers known as policy, and those policy enforcement officers are going to make sure you're abiding to the manual, the code, the statutes of their organizations and their subchapters of their United States corporation. Meaning the state of California, all caps, is a community of persons, community of birth certificates. Go look up the word state in Black's Law. The all caps is a community of persons bound within limits of federal territory. What does that mean? What is federal territory? The opportunity only to contract, or what the people of each state have given up to the feds and lawfully conveyed, because there are unlawful conveyances. And so when you take a look at a law like Texas, I've looked at all their lawfully conveyed land over to the feds, and guess what? They all have the gold fringe flag on it. That's a corporate United States flag. So I'm being very detailed on this right now to get you to understand the office position and the oath of every office position, because there's an oath to uphold the corporation. And then at the same time, there is an oath to uphold the people's God-given unalienable rights. So instead of just the recorder's office maintaining and still being the recorder, they made the lawfully elected recorder a registrar, a banker. Sneaky. I get it. So that registrar can take your deposit, thank you, and now you pay for the rest of your life for police service, fire service, and that's it. And trash in some areas. So here's where we fail for lack of knowledge. Here's the story. When you look at a grant deed, and I talked about it a little bit on the last question, I'm going to be very detailed on this one. You can record today using metes and bounds, putting it in the name of a private foundation, using lawful gold by hand, meaning transferring by hand for valuable consideration of an undisclosed amount of lawful gold by hand, using the name of a foundation, and using fee simple, absolute, and that's it, meets and bounds. So there's 5 elements. Currently, you're using a name that belongs to them, or a corporation name that belongs to them. You don't own corporations. I don't care if you hold stock. You don't own corporations. It's a certificate. You need to understand what a certificate is of stock and what a certificate is of title. You don't own it, the state does. Okay, it's a copy of the true title. The true title for any car is called a manufacturer's statement of origin. True title for a grant deed is a grant deed that has been accepted. This is where people are failing. They're assigning but not accepting. And I will get into it later. We charge for an old thing that we do. I was charging $1, but it's become a pain, so I charge $29.95. where you can buy a deed acceptance understanding of the lawful memorandum points and authorities of what a deed acceptance is, and some examples, and using different state laws and stuff. So you can go to store.hisadvocates.org, go to the real estate section, check it out. Super important. We failed. They didn't want you. Why? Because title was in control. They didn't want you to accept the grant deed. What would accepting the grant deed do? Solidify you as the owner, kind of, quasi. And so if you're going to a recorder / register office with your deed, whether you're the title, the escrow, yourself, and you're making a presentment to them, please record this. And it has joint tenant in a name, birth certificate name, using Federal Reserve notes with the $, using a legal description, which is above ground. It's not even land. And the vesting is joint tenant. The vesting alone tells you. But this is why we fail for lack of knowledge. That entire deed belongs to them. They own the name, they own the money, they own the legal description, and you're saying you're a tenant, and you're saying, please record this. I'm giving the money away to that guy, and I want to start paying you taxes. Literally. That's not a recordation. That is actually a thank you very much registration. Congratulations. We're gonna put it on this side of the books because we can, So I have lunch with the LA County recorder, not the elected one, the guy that manages the basement. And I was in the basement with everything from 1967 and before. And I absolutely was in love for an hour and a half, 2 hours, checking out different grant deeds, patents, patent books, looking at real signatures of real old presidents. It was cool. I took a bunch of pictures, and I realized, okay, these deeds are different. And I knew about meets and bounds, and I knew about fee simple because I'd been in the real estate business for a long time. But then I asked the question, can I record a deed like this in the 1850s today? And he said, all day long. And I went, mother effer. I was pissed. Excuse the language. I didn't cuss. Said that to myself. I was pissed. Why? Because I'm a professional, quasi, in my opinion. I'm an expert, in my opinion, about real estate, about transactions. Talk about getting the wool pulled over your eyes. You know what I'm saying? Talk about deceit. Just the fact that it's a legal description and not land. It's above the land. It's not land. It's not meets and bounds describing the territory or the land, not territory. Legal description is describing territory, federal territory. It's theirs. Then you're saying joint tenant. Are you kidding me? Are we not thinking this kind of stuff through? Tenant? You mean I just paid 400 grand down on $1 million house and I'm a tenant? No, we fail for lack of knowledge. Right there in front of us, using Federal Reserve notes, a debt instrument, where a Supreme Court has already ruled that any Federal Reserve note is a party to all contracts if that is used. And in the United States can enter into that agreement at any time. Using a name in which they own the rights to. So therefore, you're walking in and you're holding what you think of as ownership in a grant deed, and you're giving it to them to register. And they're going to say, hey, it's $1,000 a month to stay there. On $1 million property in California, $1,000 a month. That's what property taxes are. Congratulations, sucker. So when I got those answers, we started creating some deeds for people. And we did all kinds of different ways to do it. This goes right back to your first question. You got to bulletproof. You got to put Kevlar on everything you have. Your home is super, super important. And you can do this without owning 100% of your home. Meaning if you still have a lender on it, you still can do this. Now, I do want to warn you, there is an active in the deed of trust. There is in most deeds of trust, there's a thing called an acceleration clause. And the acceleration clause can happen if you change the vesting of title. Now, I'm going to say this. I've done this thousands of times. I have never seen, when I say I've done this thousands of times, meaning I've seen so many people out there take their home in their name and record it in a private trust, recorded in a LLC, recorded in, doesn't matter. You're still breaching the deed of trust. I have never once seen a lender, not once, do or invoke the acceleration clause. But I'm going to warn you about it. So when you go in with a properly effected deed in the name of a private church, foundation, humanitarian effort, now you have an opportunity to notice the county that it is owned by a church and that you are the fiduciary and that you want to be pulled off the tax rolls. And that's where the fight happens, because they will do that for a 501c3. Why won't they do that under the same classification of a 508c1a? Don't know, don't care. Big fight. But many people have been able to get pulled out of the county recorder's office. And on another note, many people have been able to stay in the county recorder's office and be able to remove the element of taxation because they're owned, the property is owned by a foundation. Now, does this make the county happy? Don't care. That's not what this is about. They have lied. They have done deceit. It is a corporation masquerading as a nation. It's a corporation masquerading as a state. It's a corporation masquerading as a city. It's a corporation masquerading as a township. And then they deceitfully changed the way of recording in the 50s and 60s. Why? For the reasons I've just stated. So if you want enforcement, build up your walls. That's where Trump said it right. We need to enforce the walls. Why? Because look what happens. So build up the walls. The more that you have done personally to affect the defense, where they don't have jurisdiction over the property, where they don't know who owns the property, or where there's no mailbox, where there's gates, where there's no trespassing signs, where there's a sign that says State of the Union property, where you've noticed the sheriff, they don't have jurisdiction over the land, those kinds of things. I don't want you to sound too crazy, because then in their mind, you might get to that sovereign citizen crap mentality. But to answer that, when you're serving local police and local law enforcement with the final package of your living in the private, I suggest doing it with a handshake in person. Let them know you're not crazy, and let them know your heart and what you're trying to get accomplished, and just that you'll be there to support them and help them against the tyranny that's about to hit this year, because it's an election year. 2 cents.